Hey everyone and welcome back to the news. World of Warcraft coverage has been a little bit wild lately and, while the delay may have dominated the headlines, Shadowlands beta is still trucking on and Blizzard have announced a big wave of changes. They agree with players on the maw being a bit bare, that's pretty good, and, the 7-day conduit lock, they're changing that. But, they're changing it. I do think it's a net positive, but there's a reason why people are not particularly pleased. And then also, there's even a book delay that might twig us on to a Shadowlands release date, if we tinfoil hat things. And of course, there's a whole lot more. And double, of course, it is a new month, and it's actually a pretty spooky month. And that does mean that it's Undead Month over on Patreon, and also it's Rogue Month. So you also get the Rogue pin. We don't actually have it in the office right now, but here's what an early in production sort of thing, how stuff is made, looks like. So this is the pin before it gets nickel plated, so it'll be like a silvery color. But yeah, that's what I suppose a raw pin that's not quite out of the oven yet looks like. So pretty cool. So yeah, that's what this month's loot is, which of course, if you're patron for this month and it ticks over at the end of the month, then that's what you'll get. And patrons, believe me, it's been incredible what you've allowed us to do, and especially with the Shadowlands delay, we've actually had now a lot more time to use our now more capable team to, be able to do better things for Shadowlands launch. So it's all very hype, and with that said, let's get into the Shadowlands development update. Blizzard have posted their October Shadowlands dev update. It's a post, I think the existence of which does reinforce that yes, the delay to this expansion was absolutely needed. Now, Blizzard kicked this post off by saying that they agree, with tester feedback that the maw is not really fun. And they say that being a brutal, horrible place that no soul wants to visit is something that shouldn't really come at the expense of, it not being a fun environment for players to engage with. So, yes, they've just admitted that the maw is not particularly fun and is a bit bare right now. They say they've heard the feedback that the maw is falling short as a zone, that they agree, and that to fix things up, they are going to be working to increase visual distinction and combat variety throughout the maw, and also to add in, and I think this is great, new localized events and world interactions. That's exactly what the maw needs, so it's really good they're taking the time to act on that feedback. This is certainly good. It felt a bit barren. Imagine the Timeless Isles, but not really that nice to go around in, but kind of just lacking really cool stuff to do. So if they're fixing that, I think big thumbs up. Now, Blizz also say they're giving the maw more direction, and they're going to make the progression a bit more immediately apparent to players early on, and that we're going to hear about what those changes are at a future date once they're actually ready for going live on the beta. This is seriously great. The maw was, it was not ideal. I think it's absolutely something that needed work, and that's especially the case because, as we covered a little bit ago, the maw is the primary way that you'll be getting Stygia, and that Stygia is actually used for, unlocking the conduits and sometimes upgrading them, and even the sockets as well. So it being good is super important. Conduits, next, conduits. Blizzard have finally responded to the conduit lock. We are moving in the right direction now, but it still displays the World of Warcraft development team's trademark awkwardness and over-design of stuff that should be simple. My god, I am so tired of this. Okay, they say that while the 7-day conduit cooldown may provide players with enough flexibility because they'll have, multiple soul binds unlocked and each one will have its own 7-day countdown, they agree that it's initially too limiting. No, it's not that it's initially too limiting. That's not what people's feedback was. Quit trying to save face, devs. Your argument makes no sense here. You have constantly said that people who, want to play multiple specs will be catered to by having multiple soul binds. Now, if that's the case, then it's not just a situation, like you said here, of, players have got multiple soul binds, so the 7-day per soul bind countdown doesn't really matter, because for some players, they will, A, have a situation where the other soul bind is not ideal for their spec, and B, it's earmarked for another one of the specs that they play. So that doesn't really make too much sense. Blizz, right, it was not the feedback. It was not about it being initially too limiting, although that absolutely was a problem. It was a rejection of the system's design direction at a very fundamental level. It wasn't even that the execution was bad. The feedback was that basically the idea was bad. That's what was going on here. So, Blizzard are scrapping the 7-day lock in an upcoming build. And they're replacing it, of course, with a new system, and this is called the Conduit Energy System. So, your Forge of Souls will start with 10 Conduit Energy, or whatever it's called, whatever energy, right? You get 10 energies. Placing a conduit into a socket will consume a charge of soul energy. That's what it is. Soul energy. You get 10 soul energies initially. Now, soul energy will then recharge at a rate of 1 soul energy per day up to a cap of 10 soul energy. And adding a new conduit to your collection will also restore 1 charge. Now, Blizzard say that this is to ensure that players, especially when unlocking a new conduit, will always be able to adjust their soulbinds, and that having 7+ swaps a week will allow for more adaptation while still requiring thoughtful decisions about how to customize each soulbind to your playstyle. Now, part of that's actually a bit weird, because this is better if you're just kind of doing one soulbind, but let's just say if you're like multi-specing, you've got 2 different soulbinds, this is actually in some ways, it's more flexibility, but less change overall, so it doesn't necessarily even work for that. But anyway, let's talk about it. Look, this is better in many situations than the hard 7-day lock, but it is such a WoW dev team response to a WoW dev team created problem that never needed to happen in the first place. Right, you just need to look at the responses to Blizzard's update post on their own beta testing forums and much of the community response outside of that to see that most people are just sitting there being like, why are you spending time in this? This is a waste of time. None of this is going to be fun. And I'll hammer this point till the cows come home. Seriously, where are they? Right. Systems design has let World of Warcraft down for years, and it will continue to do so until, I don't know, these guys lick a toad up a mountain and experience an ego death and realize that they've been going in the wrong direction. This post talks about thoughtful decisions and how to customize each soulbind. You know, as if it's like a Diablo 3 character and, you know, it's really big power. But look at the soulbinds and the conduits. They're so boring. Like, come on, they're not fun, exciting, thoughtful decisions, right? You're not going to be making thoughtful decisions based on what's exciting to you with this, because the whole thing is just boring fluff. That's what these things actually are, because Blizzard also want to have a competitive-ish MMO for some reason, so they can't make these things super wacky and OP like it was, you know, Diablo, right? So they're trying to have this Diablo-style action RPG progression, but then they're trying to balance it in an MMO, and then they're trying to control that because these things fundamentally don't mesh together that well when Blizzard also wants to have a mythic raiding scene and the MDI. So it's like, these are the sorts of systems that work in Diablo 3 or Path of Exile or those games where, you know, your builds are making you like crazy powerful in a radically different way. Because those games, I mean, they're just juicing that insane power of your character. And I think that's really fun. But they're trying to get the benefits of that in terms of, you know, lots of progression for players to always be working on, but within the constraints of what will possibly work in an endgame, semi-competitive, PvE-focused MMO, which is something that they do want, as evidenced by, you know, how they treat raids and how they treat Mythic Plus and things like that. And of course, as you know, I'm not somebody who thinks that World of Warcraft should be designed like an esport. I think it's an MMORPG first and foremost, but they're trying to mesh these things together, and it doesn't really work. Like, look, we didn't need this stuff to exist for WoW to be fun and to have great progression in the past. The amount of time that Blizzard have put into making this system, which essentially delivers, sorry to break it to you guys, but no interesting gameplay or decisions, but does matter to your throughput, is insanity. It's basically just these plates you've got to spin every now and then because it's a thing you've got to do before you can get back to your character. The amount of time the Blizzard have spent working on how to like control and manage players for conduits is just wild. Like, the conduits that are the best for many people are just stuff like 10% increase to a proc rate, 10% increase to damage, X% increase to damage done by ice lance to frozen targets. Like, that's just little number tweaks. That's not fun, right? That's just boring. And I get it could be powerful, but fundamentally, I think it's just boring stuff. Essentially, right, Blizzard have, in the name of creating more progression for players to do, just created a source of power that's really dull in terms of gameplay, you know, mechanics, but is really important to performance. That, of course, because of the rank system and the item levels, you've got to reacquire every single tier, because you can't just get a conduit and then that'll be that. You'll have to get the Conduit at, progressively higher item levels from doing harder and harder content, so you've basically got to regrind the Conduits that you want. And then, they've made that, and then they've spent the duration of Alpha and Beta trying to work out how to best control players with this system. First, remember, Conduits were consumable items that needed, if you had a conduit in a socket and you put a new one in it, the old one was gone, right? So you needed to constantly re-farm conduits. Players said no to that. Then Blizzard made it so they were an unlockable library, sort of like essences, but with their item levels, and with a 7-day per soulbind cooldown. Now, the players are in a situation where they're like, well, if I'm doing this soulbind on my spec and I want to modify that, I don't want to wait 7 days. I mean, imagine getting a new conduit and then having to wait 7 days before you can use it. That would have sucked. So that's been changed, and now Blizzard have went with an energy system. And I'm just going to be very, very real here. When you have to resort to a mobile game like energy system to control players, maybe you've got to rethink your priorities. Back in the day, we had glyphs, which you just bought from a scribe. You had the odd neat trinket, and, a new set bonus every tier. That was it. WoW was just fine, in fact. I actually enjoyed playing parts of the game more because I wasn't worrying about all of this progression, all this upkeep that I've got to do in my character. And, back then, simming and stuff did exist, but it wasn't that prominent, and it didn't really need to exist because the game was a lot more readable. Basically, raid bots didn't exist, right? Didn't need to exist. Life was simple, you could just play WoW. And if you think this is me being a bit silly and wild and conspiratorial, remember, Jonathan Haidt, the executive producer of World of Warcraft, said in their delay post that Shadowlands is, and this is when he was specifically referring to Endgame Matters, one of the most intricate expansions they've ever done. That is what the WoW dev team has said about Shadowlands, to which I then say that intricacy has obviously caused you a lot of issues, right? And I can tell you that what's exciting to me, what gets those big, I'm happy, excited titles and thumbnails like with our Torghast video, the stuff that gets us excited is the content, it's the fantasy, it's the new gameplay features. None of what will get people excited about this expansion is the intricacy. This is basically just a massive black hole of development resources that is doing nothing but hurting the game because those resources in an alternative timeline could have been, put into a different place. You'll never say to your friends, you've got to play Shadowlands, look at its really cool conduit progression system. You'll never say that, right? Blizzard keeps on wasting time fixing problems that they have created that players never asked for. And look, WoW team, I love your raids, I love your dungeons, your world, your art, your lore, Torghast, but man, when the systems come in, you guys are crazy paranoid control freaks. You really are, and you have been recently. And I get why you feel you have to be. The thing is, you've made the game so much more complicated, and you've really tried to get all of this, you've tried to activate the areas in a player's brain where, that make them, when they're playing Diablo 3 or Path of Exile, just keep on going and keep on going and keep on going. You're trying to integrate all of those strengths into the progression loop of your game, but now you're confronting with the fact that you then have to control that because those things really don't mesh with a lot of what World of Warcraft actually is. And I'm going to be real here, I don't even care about being perfectly diplomatic anymore in these things. It is just so grating seeing the team time and time again fall into the exact same trap. They just keep on falling in. It's like they never learn lessons in a principles-based fundamental level. We keep on telling them that they're fixing symptoms, not problems. Just look at the Azerite reforging, That's another thing that happened just in the last expansion and was unanimously sort of rejected by players. The problem is them, it's the team. That they think that these arbitrary systems of progression and control are healthy for the game. Azerite reforging sucked, and it was there because Blizzard thought they needed to control the Azerite gear, which of course also sucked. Conduits also pretty much suck in that they're not exciting, they're just a thing you've got to do and another thing you've got to get for your character so that it's in an okay place in terms of its numbers. They're just one of those, they're not exciting. And then we have this whole new system that controls them, and it just went from sucking a hell of a lot to sucking maybe a bit less. This is stuff that just isn't needed. Right, World of Warcraft was just fine, I would say better, before we started throwing heaps and heaps of time into things like this. But there is hope. because I've actually jumped to the conclusion and I've created a daring new game system. It is called Mental Gymnastics Power, and it's a new resource that adds texture and stakes to the talenting process. So you start off with 10 mental gymnastics points, and every time you change a talent in any of your specs, that point is consumed. And the thing there is, it takes a lot of mental gymnastics for, for your mage to learn an entire new spell on the fly. So that's why I've invented this brand new system, because if your character reprogrammed itself all the time, they'd get a headache, and that would suck. But of course, don't worry, because you will recharge 1 mental gymnastics point a day. And I think that's so much more interesting, because obviously what it does is it makes your talent choices matter so much more, right? Because, you can only make 10 of them a week in this daring brand new system that, by the way, is entirely just a piss take of this new Conduit system. What's going on? What's going on? Why do we feel like this is the thing to do? Blizzard, kiss, keep it simple. Just keep it simple. We don't need these things. We do not need these things. You did not need to invent conduits in the first place, and you then didn't need to spend so much time working out how to control them. For the next expansion, you see borrowed power? Throw it in the bin. Throw it in the bin, blow up the bin, get all the ashes, put them in a box, put them in the bottom of the deepest trench in the sea, and just stop thinking about it. Content is king. The things that people are excited about for WoW is doing like the new dungeons and raids with their friends, doing new PvP stuff with their friends, doing fun new game features, right? Like maybe a player housing thing or a Torghast thing. It doesn't need to be this way. Okay. Finally, Blizzard's post highlights their efforts in tuning Covenant class abilities, including some redesigns they've done, like with Flagellation that we've covered before. They are going to, they say, spend the coming weeks continuing that work, and they've said that to them here, balance in this area basically means pursuing a mix of offsetting strengths and weaknesses rather than having identical capabilities between the Covenants, and that their goal is that every combination of class and Covenant will have something commendable to it. Now, I will say, I do have to wonder if players actually want to feel locked out of that particular style of play after they've made their class and spec choice, but Blizzard are clearly married to this design, and obviously the more balanced that each one of these options is, then the better things will be, and that absolutely is what we all want. So there you go, that is Shadowlands, that's the Shadowlands development update post covered. As you can see, there's look, in the community, there is a lot of just, I think the best way to describe it is exasperated face pamming, that, Blizzard are just sort of developing another control system for conduits. And it's not because I think people think this is the worst problem in the universe. I think it's because people are really tired of this sort of thing going on in principle, because to a lot of us, it's been going on like that for quite some time indeed, and a lot of us just feel like instead of retreading, the same water again and again and again, we could just keep it simple and then perhaps focus on other things. And I would say that a world where it was just, hey, here's a bunch of fun glyphs, you can customize your class with them, go have fun, I think that would take up a lot less development time and would just allow for, more fun and less things to sort of just always be worrying about. So that's what I think. But anyway, there is the rest of this video, so let's get on to it. The Shadowlands delay is something that we've already covered. However, there are things to mention. So, physical collector's editions, those are also delayed. According to Blizzard's site, they will be shipping on or before the 31st of December 2020. So that's happening. And it's the sort of thing where, it's just those sort of annoying logistical things. Another example of one of those is there's a situation right now where people can actually have a gifted copy of a Shadowlands pre-order be revoked, but then the person who it was gifted to won't actually know if the other person refunded it. So it's just all these sort of little quibbles. So that's going on. Now, overall for the delay, if I was to characterize the fallout or the reaction to it, I think it's simple. It's widespread praise. This is something Blizzard have not done since the Burning Crusade, and they absolutely needed to do it. Now, there is anger from a select few people. Over on Twitter, I sort of took the piss out of someone on the WoW forums, basically insinuating it was like some sort of weird conspiracy between people like me and Preach to get the game delayed for, as they called, mythical raiders. Bit weird. Yeah, so look, all those people who are kind of screaming about these 1%ers, I mean, God, awesome 1%er, it's a bit weird. You know, so they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what the state of the game was like on beta. Look, it sucks that people, like, you know, had paid time off and stuff like that booked, but the game absolutely needed it. There were parts of Shadowlands that were just busted, and if another WoW expansion comes out and is a little bit busted in the way that, you know, BFA had its, like, it actually had its technical issues, then it had its design ones as well, but if another expansion comes out and is busted, that's obviously bad for the long-term health of the game. Now, also on the topic of the delay, this is very tinfoil, however, Christie Golden's Eastern Kingdoms book was set to release 1 week before the Shadowlands expansion came out, right? The 20th of October. That book has now been delayed to the 24th of November. So you could sort of try to put those things together and say, oh, right, so the expansion comes out the week after the book, so they probably have maybe some sort of locked-in date, maybe 1st of December for the expansion launch, and therefore that's why the book is the 24th of November, but that is massively tinfoil, because I don't think that a supplemental book is going to have that much of an effect over the expansion, and I also don't think they actually know exactly when the expansion is going to come out now. I think they probably have a few target weeks, and to be honest with you, I do think the week of the 1st of December is a pretty likely launch candidate for Shadowlands anyway. So there's that, yet there is actually also more, because people have been noticing some character locks and stuff like that happening. Basically, if you pre-ordered Shadowlands, then you will have gotten things like, well, I think your Allied Race Death Knight, your Pandaren Death Knight, you also will have, of course, got your boosts. Now, that's a bit of a problem, because if you boosted up a character, and then you effectively, you know, you refunded Shadowlands, which is kind of like refunding the boost, then your boosted character will be locked. So that's the sort of thing where it does make complete sense. I mean, imagine if you could pre-order the expansion, get a boost your character, then refund the pre-order, and then keep your boost. It sort of wouldn't be logically, you know, above board for that, I would say. So I think it's the sort of thing where that behavior does make a lot of sense. However, it's the sort of thing that would just feel a little bit unintuitive to some people and could be quite annoying. So that will happen. And of course, if you were gifted a copy of Shadowlands and then the person who gifted it refunded it on their end, then you, the giftee, would be locked out of, say, a boosted character that you boosted with that boost. So there you go. That's what's happening there. Next, let's talk about what you'll be able to play a lot sooner, and that is the pre-patch. And this is just a quick little thing so you're aware of what to expect. The 13th of October is the initial launch date. Of course, that's the US date. It'll be the 14th in the EU because our reset is on a Wednesday. But yes, the 13th of October, that is the pre-patch release date. However, I should be very clear that based on Blizzard's wording in their post, the actual events will start afterwards. So I would be expecting the pre-patch would come out, and then for 3 weeks, we would have just, you know, 9.0 with Shadowlands systems, and then maybe 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later, that's when things like the Scourge Invasion and the narrative campaign and the stuff in Icecrown, when that would actually kick off. I think that is a sensible way to deploy that content. The Scourge Invasion is the type of thing, it's probably fun for 2 weeks, but you don't want it being in the game for maybe, say, the 6 weeks it'll be until Shadowlands comes out, or, you know, 6 weeks plus. So I think that does make a good bit of sense, and certainly the likes of the new leveling will, you know, it'll give people plenty to do. Speaking of new leveling, yes, the Warlords of Draenor bonus objectives have been nerfed into the ground, and also Gorgrond Quest XP has been nerfed, so while our leveling guide still, I think, does work, it's nerfed a bit. That absolutely is the case. Could be nerfed. You know, you could be looking at like 20%, 25%. Now, that said, even with a nerf like that, you're still looking at extremely fast leveling times anyway, so levelers, I think, will still be happy. And ultimately, I would say this. Yeah, that was super, super, super powerful, and I actually do agree with this XP nerf being made. Now, the reason why we felt okay going ahead with that was that, as far as we expected, right, based on the release date of Shadowlands that Blizzard had, the 29th of September or I think 6th of October were the likely candidates for actual pre-patch launch day. And these leveling parameters, you know, XP values and stuff, they had been on the PTR and the beta for such a long time and had not been changed. So we really did think, especially when it flipped over to being a release candidate at one point, that was that locked in and we were okay to publish. So that's essentially what happened there. Of course, with these changes, we are now working on a new leveling guide that should be ready in time for the 13th of October. Ultimately, though, I do understand why Blizzard made the decision that they made. If Warlords of Draenor, because of the bonus objectives, was so disproportionately faster to everything else, then yeah, that's the only thing people would have done, and then instead of the new leveling having a bunch more freedom and variety, people would feel pigeonholed into a certain direction, which obviously would not be good for the long-term health of the game. Moving on to beta-related topics, then, we do have the recent balancing pass that has been done on classes, Covenant abilities especially, and a few soulbinds. Now, as explained in Blizzard's whole, post about the delays, this is the type of thing they'll be very focused on over the next while, so they get it right for launch. So recently, we have seen some targeted buffs, but we've also seen a lot of nerfs to outliers. I mean, take the bone spike that everyone was talking about for the Necrolord rogues. That's now significantly less powerful, which is good because it does mean there's now actually a bit more choice, realistically speaking, with with your rogue Covenant choice. Overall, though, I do think that this theme of just crushing everything down a little bit, I think that's what's going to play out. And the reason why is, well, think about it. The less these things actually factor in as a percentage of people's overall damage, then the less that having minor balancing issues will actually matter, right? I mean, generally, balancing an element of a whole is a bit easier when that element is not really contributing a massive amount to the whole. And what I'd say is a good example there is corruptions, right? Corruptions being relatively pretty imbalanced wouldn't have mattered as much if corruptions weren't providing like 15, 20, 25% of people's damage. So I think this does make a lot of sense, and it especially makes sense when we actually look at Blizzard's explanation for this. And I think it's interesting that they did this explanation, and then pretty shortly after they made this explanation, what happened? Well, we actually got the announcement of, the delay of Shadowlands. So what Blizzard said is that while in some cases the magnitude of these buffs and nerfs may feel large, especially the nerfs, it's necessary to bring outlier abilities in line with their targets so the players can actually make accurate comparisons between abilities. And yeah, broadly speaking, I think this is the right thing to do. I think it's a pragmatic move, and I do actually, surprise, surprise, wish the team every success in getting things to where they need to be. I mean, that's, that big Covenant spreadsheet. It's looking a little bit better now than it did like 2 weeks ago there's parts of that spreadsheet that are a little bit memeable because, you can't just say, good, bad, or like what, bis, good, bad, trash. That doesn't accurately capture everything, but it gives you an okay sort of general perspective. But even that general perspective is looking a little bit better as time is going on. So, yeah, I think that, these things being squashed down and being a bit less wacky in the name of balance is, obviously not the most fun way that it could be. I think that things being a bit more fun and wacky would make sense if you could sort of swap your Covenant power kit. But if we're not going to be having any form of swapping there of the power between the different Covenants, of course, your actual Covenant decision being a, good, proper, semi-permanent feeling thing. If we're not going to do that, then I think what Blizzard is doing here absolutely is the right thing. And basically, if they can spend the next 4, 5, 6 weeks just doing waves and waves and waves and waves of changes of this stuff, then yeah, I think we'll be in a situation where balance, will it be perfect? I can't really tell you that. Will it be better than it would have been if Shadowlands released on the 27th of October? I would say yes, absolutely. And then next, in today's video series of things that really do matter to your character but don't really make for sexy video titles, we've got legendaries. So, sources for the legendary effects are on the beta. And to really cut a long story short, they're from a few different things, right? They're from doing Torghast, they're from honored reputations, so not exalted, not revered, honored, which I think is pretty reasonable. They're from dungeon and raid bosses, they're from the PvP honor vendor, and some are from world bosses. Now, that world boss stuff, I'm a little bit worried about that because it would kind of suck for a player if there's a super important legendary effect that they really need, it's really powerful, and it's just like, yeah, the world boss rotation, it's however many weeks away. I think that's maybe something they should have another thought about. But overall, this is 100 million% better than the Legion legendaries, where it was just randomness. Here, it's pretty much just from doing stuff. You can select the legendary effect you want, you can go and you can do it. They appear to be like 100% drops, so that seems pretty good to me. And another example there is there's the PvP honor vendor. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be thinking of having to do PvP to get essences in BFA. I would say, it being from the honor vendor, you know, the hope there is that it's just a thing you can get, like, for honor, and not a situation where you've got to do a specific type of PvP content that you might not want to do. Because even for the people who don't really want to do that much PvP, if they can just do that by doing, you know, a few daily battlegrounds, maybe a weekly brawl, something like that, then that's going to be a lot more comfortable for them than, you know, you must do 3 PvP islands. So I think that's going to be something that people will like. The other thing we should remember here is that, well, 2 things actually. Number 1, there's no ranks to these legendary effects. There are ranks to the legendary items, right, where you can use this, you know, you can use your soul ash to increase the item level of your legendaries. But for the actual effects themselves, you just get the effect and that's it. There's not like a rank 1, 2, and 3 version of the effect. So it's not going to be a situation where, you know, you've got to get, say, I don't know, like honored in a reputation to get your rank 1 essence, and then do something else to get your rank 2 essence, then exalted for your rank 3 essence. That's not going to happen. I think that's going to be a lot more comfortable for people. And yeah, of course, these are also account-wide, right? So those general ones, like if you unlock them in one character, they're just account-wide. You know, if you, I don't know, maybe you've got 2 of the same character or 2 of the same class even, I guess your class-specific ones will be usefully, you know, account-wide in their unlocks. But anyway, point is, this is so much better than Legion. So much better. Oh my god. Very happy that's going in a better direction. And next up, we've got something that's going to be, I think, a goal for a lot of people. You know, we can be very focused on the heroic raiders, the mythic raiders, and the high-level mythic plus players, but for a lot of people, they just want to be slowly chipping away at getting something new while they go do their transmog runs and stuff like that. And for them, it turns out that the Covenant set is more than just a nice transmog for you to unlock, because the Covenant set is gear that you can wear that has stats, and also now has 2 things: a set bonus and an upgrade system. So it's kind of like a souped up version of the class order hull sets from Legion. There is a 3-piece bonus that increases your out of combat regeneration, especially in your Covenant's home zone. Then the 5-piece and 8-piece sets for it basically just give you a Covenant themed throughput benefit. So pretty good. Now, you get 1 piece of this gear for each chapter of the endgame Covenant campaign up to and including the 7th chapter. And the 7th chapter is, I think, it's a renown level 19. Now, the way that then works is that each of the 2 weeklies, well, basically, the weekly quests give you 2 renown levels in total, but then you actually doing the Covenant campaign quests, each step of those will give you a renown level as well. And I think when you put that together, it basically means it'll take you about 6 weeks to unlock the full set here. And then what's really good is there is an upgrade system. Now, this will take them from their initially, I think it's like item level 150 something, so pretty weak. It'll take them from that pretty weak item level up to Mythic plus 0 item level. I believe that's 183. Now, that is not really, that's not great. That's, I'd say, mostly useless if you're going to be doing loads of Mythic Plus and raiding and stuff like that. But I do think that this is a pretty good set for many casual players to be working towards. And I think if the stats are right, then maybe for other players it could help to fill in the gaps. I actually do think they could bring up that item level a little bit higher than it is and still have gearing feel pretty fair. But point here is, this is not super important to progression-focused players, but I think for a lot of players, this operating an upgrade sort of system will be a nice thing for them to do. So, thumbs up for that. Next up, Warmode. Many people have been commenting on this, especially as we're about to go into a new expansion and be leveling up loads of characters. Because, of course, when most people think about Warmode, they don't actually think of, you know, a fun new player versus player gameplay system in the open world. They actually think of an experience boost for their characters so they can level faster. Now, the thing here is that many players believe it's a bit unfair right now because of the Alliance-Horde population balance, where it seems that Horde players are a bit more willing to engage in War Mode. And of course what that means is that Alliance players often end up with their War Mode bonus XP being, you know, not 10%, but instead being more like 20% or 30%, while the Horde players are just sitting there with a 10% boost. Now, since many players on both sides often just turn on War Mode purely for the sake of leveling up faster, it means that people are opting into this PvP system for that reward, and they actually don't intend to PvP. And I don't know about you, but I mean, half the time when I turn on War Mode for the sake of leveling up faster, and I'm running past like a Horde character, they don't fight me because it turns out they turned on war mode for the same reason that I did, so they can get an XP boost, or, you know, like an artifact power boost or something like that. So you do have to wonder, is this fair? Well, this is what a lot of players were asking, and Blizzard actually responded, and their post says that players could choose to shift the relative balance between the factions, and that if the players did choose that, then the bonus would shift. And I think that's a bit of an odd statement, because players would never organize in that manner sort of naturally. This is a systemic problem of Blizzard's creation in the eyes of many, many players. A lot of people believe, and I actually think, me included, that PvE boosts, you know, I don't think that should be a reward for engaging in a PvP mode. Now, Blizzard originally argued that the War Mode experience bonus existed there to counteract the efficiency losses that you would experience trying to level up in a PvP environment. But I'd say that often just ends up not really being the case. And that means that the incentive structure for War Mode is just a little bit bizarre. Now, I'd say personally, right, I don't think that War Mode should be about leveling or should have anything like that. I think that what Blizzard should do is invest way more into War Mode for PvP players by deepening it as a PvP experience. I think they should add in more objectives. I mean, come on, imagine if they had like little capturable bases and things like that going on, and then you could actually get more, you know, PvP gear and things that matter to you as a PvP player by doing War Mode. Maybe that would help to reinvigorate, right, what War Mode is, and in a way where it's PvP first and not just this weird thing where a whole bunch of us are just using it for an XP boost. And I would also say, you know, there's some things here that Blizzard should have seen coming. Just intuitively, it makes sense that, like, Horde players are more down for doing some PvP. I mean, come on their side, they've got Chris Metz and Screaming Loktar. What have we got on the Alliance side? You know, oh, grab your sword and fight the Horde. It's not as cool, is it? Right? So I just think that the Horde player base, they're, like, more interested in PvP. At least that's just something in my head. You know, almost like thematically, I just think the player profile of the Horde player is more likely to go into War Mode, and it's like that is what you see when you look at how the Alliance always have the War Mode XP boost like pretty high up. Seems like a weird problem to exist in the game. Will Blizzard fix it? No, it doesn't seem so, and that certainly means that if you're like me, and you're an Alliance player, and you're going to be leveling up in Shadowlands with a group of people from the start, then yeah, the PvP concerns won't really exist, and we'll probably get a 20 or 30% boost to our XP when we're leveling up, which certainly seems pretty powerful. Then next, some topics to round us off for the day. And first, two Torghast ones. Number one, so it's been posted, well, no, not posted, it's been found that the Corridor Creeper mount from Torghast actually can be mounted in the Maw. Now that's big because, of course, in the Maw, you can't mount normally, right? Now this is actually really big because, well, your time in the Maw is capped. And it's sort of soft capped, and then eventually hard capped, I guess, if the debuff gets high enough, of course, by the Eye of the Jailer debuff. And that does mean that if you can mount and zoom about the place faster, you can get more done in the limited amount of time that you can actually spend in Torghast, or in the Maw. And I actually think that's kind of cool, in a way. Now, there's a little bit of me that thinks, should some Mythic Raider feel like they have to get this mount in order to go to the Maw so they can be, you know, X% more efficient? And then I kind of think to myself, well, if we just follow that to its logical conclusion, you know, sort of reduce ad absurdum stuff, then it just gets a little bit silly. And I then think of a game like, say, Guild Wars 2. And you know what? In Guild Wars 2, their mounts are so cool. You've got some mounts that are really good at running in the ground. You've got some that are really good at gliding. There's like a rabbit-style mount that's really good at doing like hopping, so it can go like really high in a jump. There's a dragon, I think, that's very much a little bit more World of Warcraft-like and just go around 3D. But it's basically, right, it's a game where the mounts have all got like different things, right? Different specialities to them. I think there's like also different things that happen whenever you dismount the mounts. So I think it's like you can get a mount and then go into combat and like, there's just a whole bunch of stuff there. And I actually think it's pretty cool because when I look at the Guild Wars 2 mounts, they're way more unique and exciting than WoW ones because every single WoW mount just operates in the same manner. That's kind of boring. So I see something like the Corridor Creeper, and you know what? I kind of think that's pretty cool. Now, also, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to re-explain something that has got so many people confused. They think this comes from Floor 8 of Torghast. And if you think this mount comes from Floor 8 of Torghast, then you're going to be in for a real surprise when it turns out it actually comes from Floor 144. It comes from completing Layer 8 of Torghast's Twisting Corridors mode. Now, each layer is, successively even harder, okay? And each layer is a set of 18 floors. So getting to Layer 8 and completing that is basically you totally maxing out Torghast. At least the launch version of Torghast. It does mean basically this mount is quite an achievement, pretty cool thing to get, because getting that far into Torghast is, it is a mean feat. At least I think it is anyway. So, there you go. That's a bit of how Torghast works, and also how the Corridor Creeper mount works. There's actually a little bit more. Now, this is something that just happened with the most recent build of the beta. It's very weird. I want to call it up here, but right now we're not 100% sure what Blizzard actually intend. It would be lovely if they would tell us. On the beta, there's some weird behavior going on, where it looks like that unlocking the Twisting Corridors mode is actually time-gated. Because basically you unlock it by doing the longer quest chain. The way it was previously, right, is you get into Torghast, and then to actually unlock Torghast, you would have to do all of these quests to rescue characters. But those quests, they were like, you basically would have to do like loads of consecutive Torghast runs, and it was such a drag. So instead, Blizzard made a great change where you would just far more quickly unlock Torghast, and you could do those quests later. Now, right now, it seems like those quests are still needed to unlock the Twisting Corridors, but that they're happening in a time-gated way. And I'm not going to jump down the throat or anything like that for this right now, because it is too early to call. Blizzard have literally just not commented on this, and we don't really know what's going on. But I will say, Blizzard, bloody hell, don't time-gate Twisting Corridors. Loads of people, when they go to Torghast, that's like the thing they really care about, and if you just make them have to sit there and wait for a bunch of arbitrary quest timers, they're not going to be happy people. So don't time-gate it. If you need something to make the final quest there cool, then invent that, but don't make it be access to the Twisting Corridors. That will decrease people's hype for getting into that feature, and it will leave them with less of a good impression, which is not what you want to do when it's in the early days of you engaging with a new exciting Shadowlands feature. Okay, to do some quick fire, I suppose. The pre-made group finder is now locked until you're level 50. That, I think, basically means that it's there to cut out the advertising of boosts. Now, I see that and I think, oh, that's really dumb. Surely somebody should be allowed to use the pre-made group finder when they're on a, not max level character. But I suppose that's just a move Blizzard are making to be pragmatic, because realistically, sub-level 50, yeah, the pre-made group finder is just used for a whole bunch of boosts and stuff like that and is really clogged up. So there's that. Then also there is a big dungeon balance pass. Now, one thing that's key here is the Grievous Wounds, the affix for Mythic Plus, was nerfed by 50%, and I mean, when I looked at the comments, a lot of the big M plus people seem pretty happy about that, so maybe that's a good thing. And they also did a tuning pass on the dungeons, which is the sort of thing you would expect as we enter the later days of the expansion. Then finally, there was a minor drama where it looked like some of the Warlords of Draenor crafted gear. I think they were pretty cool transmog sets. I used to roll them for a good while, but it looked like they could no longer be attained. Now, Blizzard later commented saying that that was a side effect of changes made in Shadowlands, and that all those transmogs will be unlockable, albeit in a future patch. So it just seems like it's a sort of thing where it's an unfortunate side effect, but they just have higher priorities to fix. And given all that's going on, I would agree they do. That's it for the WoW news. Lots of things happened. There was a lot to catch up with today, but I think a lot of it is just getting down to the nitty-gritty of how our gameplay experience of this expansion is going to be. Because yes, these features may be fun, whatever, may be with the classes, but ultimately if, the things that will impact your actual personal gameplay experience are, you want to get some conduits in your character so you can progress your soulbinds. You want to get your legendaries. We've got to dive into those things because they are pretty important. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed. Of course, if you want some cool loot, this loot and also the rogue pin, which we will be showing decently soon, then you can, go onto the Patreon. And of course, if you're a patron for this month, and then it'll charge you, I believe, in the first day of the next month. If you're on that, then you'll get that cool stuff in the post. Anyway, thank you for your support. That is it for me, and I will see you next time.